Hello, my friends. I hope you had a good weekend. It's September 11th, 2023, a date, of course, that lives in infamy, but nonetheless, happy birthday to my brother-in-law, Mark. I know it's tough to have your birthday on September 11th. What a brutal piece of unfortunate luck as part of your biography. But it is also my brother-in-law, Mark, that first told me that it's very possible that magic mushrooms, psilocybin, could be a therapeutic breakthrough for addiction. How about that? Just one of the things I'm going to be talking about with my guest today, Dr. Candida Maurer, psychologist that I connected with, had a really amazing conversation with out in Iowa City. I think you're going to love it. I learned so much in this conversation, and we went deep and had a real great connection. So if you want to skip the news and start with the interview, you can go ahead and skip to 18 minutes in. But for those of you staying with me to see the fruits of my labor hours every night, putting together this news segment Monday through Thursday night, picking the most impactful stories and sound bites I can, packing it into 10 or 15 minutes, then let's jump into it, shall we? Of course, the biggest story over the weekend was the horrific 6.8 magnitude earthquake that struck Morocco late Friday night, killed more than 21 people as of late Sunday night. The country's strongest earthquake in more than a century, according to Morocco's Interior Ministry. Of course, hopefully they'll be finding survivors in the days to come. But terrible news and not much to say about it here in the podcast. Thoughts and prayers if you've got them, and always a reminder not to take any moment for granted. Now, quickly, a palate cleanser and something happier. Over the weekend, of course, Coco Gauff won the U.S. Open. You might not be a golf fan, but if you're a fan of happy human stories, you'll love this one because she's just 18 years old and she rallied to beat a Russian player, Aryna Sabalenka. A lot of people, maybe you were watching it the other night, and Coco Gauff rallied to come back and beat her. Everybody talking about it over the weekend. Just a wonderful story, and this video going viral of her dancing as a child and spectator when she was like 8 years old at the same U.S. Open that she just won as an 18-year-old. And if you haven't heard this, it's worth hearing 10 more times. This is a fun and inspiring quote from the young tennis player.
And then the last couple things I want to say, honestly, thank you to the people who didn't believe in me. I mean, like a month ago, I won a 500 title, and people said I would stop at that. 2 weeks ago, I won a 1,000 title, and people were saying that was the biggest it was going to get. So 3 weeks later, I'm here with this trophy right now. You know, I tried my best to carry this with grace, and I've been doing my best. So honestly, to those who thought who were putting water on my fire, you're really adding gas to it. And now I'm really burning so bright right now.
Such a really awesome story. Hashtag Black Girl Magic trending all over social media. And that was, I think, a happy story over the weekend to see that young woman fulfilling her dreams. And she's just beginning. All right, now back to serious news. To curb gun violence in New Mexico, the governor there, Michelle Lujan Grisham, on Friday enacted a temporary 30-day ban on open and concealed carry of firearms in any public spaces across Bernalillo County, that's Albuquerque. And, of course, that's led to 3 quick lawsuits and 2 New Mexico lawmakers calling for impeachment. The reaction is going to be swift there, but I definitely wanted to mention that story because I think it's an interesting one to see the governor doing that. And even some Democrats are saying that she can't do that because she doesn't have the legal jurisdiction to under the U.S. Constitution. So we'll see what happens. But it is worth hearing, I feel like, the audio of the New Mexico governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, explained why she declared a state of emergency for gun violence.
You got a concealed carry permit in Albuquerque walking down a public street, they're not going to get arrested.
I can make the point that they should be. And this is the point. I'm willing to do anything and everything within a shred of evidence-based effort. Because if you're not horrified that on any street corner in too many cities in New Mexico, there is someone with a gun sticking out of their waist or their belt, And I'll tell you, if you're a young person, you're not allowed to have a handgun.
Well, it's a crime already.
I got it, but we won't be able to arrest all of them. So imagine, just in a perfect world, if this was upheld, it gives all of these police officers the ability to focus on the real criminals.
Last follow-up.
Yeah.
But
your point is valid.
You took an oath to the Constitution. Isn't it unconstitutional to say you cannot exercise your carry license?
With one exception, and that is if there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. There are restrictions on free speech. There are restrictions on my freedoms. In this emergency, this 11-year-old and all these parents who have lost all these children, they deserve my attention to have the debate about whether or not in an emergency we can create a safer environment. Because what about their constitutional rights? I took an oath to uphold those too. And if we ignore this growing problem without being bold, I've said to every other New Mexican, your rights are subrogated to theirs. And they are not, in my view.
Well, there you go. That's the governor of New Mexico. And guess how gun owners reacted? Well, they got their guns and they went and rallied. Open carried their pistols and their rifles, and they went there in Albuquerque to defy the New Mexico governor's executive order banning the open and concealed carry of firearms. And police did not intervene at all to or enforce the order. The cops chose to defy an order, and, well, there you go. Everybody who loves their guns more than the kids. Well, at least that's how I see it. That an unfair binary? Well, speaking of assholes, let's have a little bit of fun at the expense of the My Pillow guy, now forever known here on this show as the Lumpy Pillow guy. Did you see this over the weekend? This dumb Mike Lindell, during his deposition, this is what he said to the lawyer questioning him.
Okay, and I'm not asking about the lumpy pillow calls.
No, they're not lumpy pillows. That's not what they call on. Okay? When you say lumpy pillows, now you're an asshole. You got that? You're an asshole, is what you are. No, he's an asshole. No, he's an ambulance chasing asshole. That's what you are. Lumpy pillows, kiss my ass. Put that in your book. No, they answer anything, any problem customer that wants to reach Mike Lindell. Those are the ones. I want to talk to Mike Lindell. I want to talk to Mike Lindell. They send them to here and they go, or they call about maybe they didn't get their pillow on time because of the FedEx or whatever. Well, we'll cover them even though it could be somebody else's fault. Nobody called because of a lumpy pillow. But good one, though.
You done?
Yeah, I'm done.
What I'm saying...
Obviously, you don't have a My Pillow, too. You don't, do you?
What I'm saying is, Mr. Lindell...
Asshole. Well, go ahead. No, I'm pissed.
I understand.
Yeah, go. When you're saying what?
I guess he's not very happy. All right, well, I thought that was funny. Well, you know who isn't funny, or what isn't funny? Climate change deniers. And I'm going to give you 38 seconds of one of the most infamous ones. This is a senator, a United States Senator, Ron Johnson, who has been a climate change science denier for a long time, and probably the most prominent now in the Senate, now that old Captain Snowball, Jim Inhofe, bought the old drought-ridden farm. Here he is on Fox News.
Dagan, there's 1,600 scientists from around the world that just joined in a declaration led by 2 Nobel laureates that said we are not in a climate emergency, that all this climate change alarmism is based on bad science, completely ignoring the impact of clouds to basically be a heat sink. Again, the climate has always changed, always will. I'm not alarmist, I'm not in denial, but we've spent over $5 trillion globally on climate change. We haven't moved the needle, according to climate alarmists. I mean, how much more are we going to waste? These windmills, according to an earlier report on your network, are killing the whales. Yeah. Again, this whole climate change agenda is driven toward control over our lives. It's economically destructive. It's why we are experiencing inflation and high energy prices. But that's all this president is focused on.
All right, that's about enough from you. Why didn't anybody think of the clouds as being the issue? I looked into his 1,600 scientists claim, and of course, it is an organization called the Climate Intelligence Foundation, Netherlands-based, and they have conducted little to no climate research, these scientists. One analysis debunking it found that a list of signatories includes a commercial fisherman, a retired chemist, a cardiologist, and an air conditioning engineer alongside a number of retired geologists. And the organization has close ties with the main Dutch Nationalist Party. Not a good or reliable group, so nothing to see, obviously, there, but did want to tell you a little background on the bullshit that he is referring to on Fox News. And for his part, our leader, the president, who is traveling all around the planet, is at the G20. He's in Vietnam. He held a press conference in Vietnam to cap off his trip at the G20 summit in New Delhi, India, and with his diplomatic meetings with the general secretary in Vietnam. He took some questions, and he called climate change deniers a dwindling. Well, let's listen.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's Aurelia and for AFP. I had a question on the climate crisis. You just mentioned the G20. Just this week, the United States warned that if there is no phasing out of fossil fuels, it won't be possible to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. There was no agreement at the G20 on fossil fuels. How concerned are you about this lack of consensus?
It wasn't so much an agreement that we would try to meet the goals of the G20. The United States is going to meet those goals, by the way. We're going to exceed those goals. A lot of other countries are as well. But we want to give those countries that don't have the economic wherewithal and did not cause the problem in the first place. For example, I met with Lula in Brazil. I started off way back in the 80s with a really fine Republican senator named Dick Lugar. We said, here's what we're going to do. If you owe us money, we're going to forgive your debt if you maintain your forest, because they become carbon sinks. They're the things that take carbon out of the air. And so we're talking to what we should be and the countries that cleared their land and put cattle on it and farming and did all the things that increased development. They, in fact, are the main reason why we've gotten as far down the road to disaster here as we have.
Well, clearly the president understands the science. He was explaining it pretty well, bumbled through a little bit there, but I thought he sounded pretty acute in that example. Later on, he went on this rambling, I won't play it for you, but explanation of what the name he calls climate deniers by referencing an old movie, an old John Wayne movie. It was not great, but anyway, he finally gets to the point about an Apache Indian in the movie referring to John Wayne like this and ties it all together with climate deniers.
They're on their horses and their saddles, and there's 3 or 4 Indians in headdresses, and the Union soldiers. And the Union soldiers basically saying to the Indians, "Come with me, we'll take care of you, everything will be good." And the Indian looks at John Wayne and points to the Union soldier and says, "He's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier." Well, there's a lot of lion, dog-faced pony soldiers out there about global warming, but not anymore. All of a sudden, they all realize it's a problem. And there's nothing like seeing the light.
Oh, man. You should have probably spared us that story, but you get to the point eventually. All right. That's all the sound I got for you. I just want to run through a bunch of headlines, and then we'll get to my conversation with Dr. Candida Maurer. Over the weekend, the disgraced former president Donald Trump was in South Dakota, where he got endorsed by their governor, Kristi Noem, and he did not sound great himself at that speech. And he also went to the Iowa State game, where he got booed and some cheers, but there was confusing clips released that made it look like he just got cheers. So that was a fun thing. The best thing was a photo that went viral of him looking out from the VIP seating booth, and you can see this guy giving him 2 middle fingers, and Trump is looking right at him. It's a great picture. If you haven't seen it, check my Twitter or feed or just Google it. It's great. The Spanish soccer chief has resigned after 3 weeks after forcibly kissing a player. That nightmare is finally, I hope, over. Luis Rubiales finally resigned after a complete loss of support from Spanish soccer officials and nationwide protests over his behavior at the World Women's Cup final. Happy to see that headline tonight. And the rise of COVID-19 infections is a headline you've heard about the First Lady, Joe Biden's recent bout with the virus. You might know somebody who's got it, maybe you. Public health experts tracking the numbers aren't right now predicting that this is going to be a tsunami of hospitalizations and deaths the way we saw a year ago. Given the level of immunity that we all have, experts are saying that people who have been vaccinated, boosted, people who have been infected like you or me, where we have hybrid immunity, the chances of this being an overwhelming rush of cases in hospitals is probably low, according to experts, including Dr. Fauci, formerly the White House's top pandemic advisor. He said he's not alarmed by the uptick in cases, but he's keeping an eye on it. He said there's no doubt this is going on since we're now at the end of the summer. It's likely it will increase as we get into the fall and winter, so we need to be prepared for that. I was talking to my mom yesterday. She was talking to me about all the vaccines she's going to get, the flu vaccine, the RSV vaccine. And when the new COVID-19 booster vaccine is out, Mom is going to get that too. Good on you, Mom. All right, that's all the news I've got for you here on Monday. Of course, it is September 11th, and so always a solemn day. It's the 22nd anniversary. Of course, I was in New York and lived through that day, and I don't really have a lot to say about it. I have a hard time thinking and talking about it. I get a little bit triggered, actually, when I saw some of the pictures and start coming out, and I think back on that. So I just know, and I've said it many times, that for me, more than anything else, that day taught me to realize how quickly things can just be wrapped over, vaporized. So be grateful for each moment. That's how I look at September 11th in my mind and use it in my life for better. Now, speaking of things you might want to use in your life for better, many of you have done mushrooms. I know this because at a hangout a few weeks back when we were talking about it, many folks volunteered that they had used magic mushrooms at some point in their life. Well, today I've got a great guest as part of my big Iowa trip last week. Thank you again to Mark Nolte. Thank you to Lincoln and Casey and others who came out to my show. It was awesome to meet you guys finally and hang out with you, but I got some great interviews, including with today's guest. She's a licensed psychologist, a PhD, a rehab counselor, co-founder of a healing center, a bodywork therapist, a certified psychedelic therapy and a research practitioner, a Reiki master, healing touch practitioner, a meditation teacher, hypnotherapy expert, dream work, energy medicine, and now she's conducting an experiment to help people who are addicted to alcohol through using magic mushrooms. One of the things that can be done. We talk about all of it. The first conversation as I wade into this issue and think about using them myself. You can find more about Dr. Candida Maurer online at our website, candidamaurer.com. Links to that and the rest of her information in today's show notes. Or you can find her at the Mental Health Clinic at the University of Iowa Health Center, where I visited her in her hospital. The audio, I think, is pretty good. I did a pretty good job for a remote. You'll hear it's not my normal quality, but I thought it was pretty good. I had two great microphones. We had a great conversation, a great connection. And after we were done, she asked if she could give me a hug. We really hit it off, and I definitely will be staying in touch with Dr. Candida Maurer. I think you're really going to like her. Let's do it. Okay. Are you going to correct me for calling you Dr. Maurer, or can I call you Dr. Maurer?
You can call me Dr. Maurer if you'd like, but Candida is also fine.
What are your patients? Do you have that rule with them?
I always tell them to call me Candida. Yeah. I don't like to pretend that there's a difference in terms of hierarchy between me and them.
I'm really very excited and happy to talk to you. I haven't had this conversation about the issue which you're an expert on, so I hope that my questions will be good enough as a kind of starting point for folks who are really interested in your work and in this world, which has become much more, I want to say, let me start with this, mainstream. Tell me where you started.
Definitely.
Personally, then we can get to professionally when it comes to psychedelics.
Yeah, I mean, I was a hippie, as I recently told you, and I did a lot of psychedelic drugs. I did a lot of psychedelic drugs. Probably too many, but they changed my life. Absolutely. Because I was coming out of a really difficult childhood, bad parenting, father died, mother incompetent, etc. And it showed me, oh my God, there's this other level of reality that is imbued with spirit and imbued with meaning that we don't know anything about unless we, in my personal opinion, unless we meditate really deeply and have very dedicated practices, or unless we use psychedelic medicines.
Or both?
Or both. Because I do meditate
I do
every
too.
day. Yeah.
I do every day.
Yep.
And it's a huge game changer, and we can talk about that. But that has gotten a lot of coverage and press for the last 2,000 years. More now. But
True.
I certainly want to stick mostly to the psychedelics. When you say that, just try to understand what we mean by this. It's personal, or everybody has their own way of looking at it. When you say you did a lot, does that mean you did psychedelics every day, once a month, once a week?
There was a time.
Over a few years?
Yeah, over several
years. What does that
years.
mean, I did a lot?
Okay. I started taking psychedelics when I was 19 with a boyfriend. I moved through another boyfriend, and then a man friend who was very knowledgeable and adept at understanding the mystical parts of psychedelic medicine. And we spent a lot of time together exploring those areas. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. I would say that, the number of psychedelics I did, who knows? But no, it was never daily. Nobody does it daily.
I didn't think so.
No,
but
and
when
if they
someone
do,
says a lot,
oh my gosh, no, it would
alcohol
never be
and
a good
pot
result.
are done daily by a lot of people.
But not psychedelics.
Right.
No way. Well, for one thing, your brain can't handle it. What happens is your brain uses serotonin as part of the psychedelic experience, and it uses it up. So if you did like LSD today, and then you did it tomorrow, you might get kind of high. If you did it the third day, you wouldn't have much of anything going on, because your brain just needs to catch up.
There's a reservoir of serotonin or whatever chemicals that get used up and have to be replaced. So tell me about your practice up until fairly recently.
True.
When you really changed. I mean, what
my husband and I were both kind of radical psychologists. Started an alternative medicine center here, like wing and a prayer kind of thing. And it became incredibly...
When you say here, do you mean Iowa City, or do you mean affiliated with the hospital?
No, I mean Iowa City.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, the hospital was definitely not into what we were doing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So, yeah, I mean, I'm surprised they are now. Some cities, and we'll talk about that. But so you started this practice, you and your husband, in Iowa City, which was...
Correct. We were combining alternative medicine with psychology. So we both became massage therapists, for instance, using shiatsu with clothing on. I always need to say that. Chinese medicine, herbalism, dream work, hypnosis, meditation, energy medicine. All of those things became part of my practice.
What brought you to those things? And your husband was on the same page. That's
definitely
got to be important for a marriage, even if he wasn't himself a doctor, right? I mean, imagine you doing those things and your husband, works at the mill. He's like, "What are you doing with this massage and all these energy?" Like,
you're crazy.
But you guys were on the same page.
We definitely
on one end of a spectrum, which you refer to as radical.
Yeah, it was radical. When we opened our doors, we opened them in 1993 to this kind of a practice. And I mean, we were the only people doing it. We were the only people in Iowa doing it. And, there may have been people on the coasts, I imagine there were, but we were the only people, even in the Midwest, that I knew about who were combining psychology in that particular way. It became wildly successful. I mean, bizarrely, wildly successful, because apparently it's exactly what is needed.
Yeah, and there was no supply. You were it.
Right.
And there's a lot of demand for it.
Exactly.
Who were your patients, and what were you working on? Were they traditional kind of issues that people would come to you for, or because you practiced this different kind, did you attract a different type of patient that had a specific issue?
I would say both.
Men and women?
Both. Men and women. I would say
Men
both.
went to therapy way back in the day? In Iowa?
A few.
3 guys.
Gary? Yeah, 3 guys. Exactly.
We know them well.
I
They
saw
really
all
worked.
3 of them.
They worked hard to better themselves.
Exactly.
And look at them all now. They're presidents of companies. But yeah.
So it was, it wasn't only alternative people showing up. It was people who were at the end of their rope with traditional medicine because they'd tried the antidepressant medication. Right. They had tried anti-anxiety medication. They'd had major childhood trauma, and none of it was really helping them. So we definitely changed the world a little bit in Iowa City, Iowa.
What did you start with? Like, what kinds of things were you doing then? Explain to me, because I have very little understanding of a lot of the work that you do around dreams and childhood trauma, obviously, but energy and Reiki. I've never understood that, but I know a lot of people who say they've gotten all kinds of benefits from it. And we can start to get to the science around it, because people often punch out when you hear some of these radical things, certainly then, if not now. I mean, how do you prove, to folks listening or elsewhere that there are great benefits to that? So tell me a little bit about, people are always skeptical, but aren't they? You tell me. I mean,
some people are skeptical, not everyone.
Have it changed over your career?
It has definitely changed over my career. So, for instance, things like Reiki have become sort of part of the zeitgeist, right? To some extent.
Just explain a little bit to folks who aren't familiar with that.
Yeah, Reiki is an energy medicine that was, I guess you could say, discovered, but we've always used energy medicine. We have always known about these things. We just hadn't labeled it Reiki, okay? So when I say energy medicine, we're working with the bioelectric fields of the body. And we're tuning into where it's disturbed, and we're trying to give it coherent frequencies, I'll put it that way, that will allow it to stabilize and allow it to maybe heal. And that's a lot of what energy medicine does.
What would be an example of someone needing that and benefiting from it? Is it anybody that comes in and gets the benefits of it? Or do I say, listen, I'm having issues with anxiety, depression, or childhood trauma, and I've been told specifically that this would be the best? I mean, how do you evaluate what of all these practices that you're an expert at to apply to a different patient?
That is such a good question, Pete.
Oh, thank God. Because I wasn't...
It's never just, you said this, so I'm going to do this. Right? It's much more intuitive than that, and it's much more process-oriented. So when someone comes in the door, I'm not going to put them into, some kind of a hypnotic trance right away. I am going...
You did it to me. I thought it was very... No, I understand. Yes.
Yes, and all of this is being hypnotized, okay?
Every listener will now... Yeah,
absolutely.
So you... Go ahead. Sorry, I'm interrupting with silly jokes.
No, that's all right. I would say people were walking in our door knowing we were doing unusual alternative things. So they already had a predisposition to come to us and experience what we had to offer, which, great, right? Great. They were open to it from the beginning, or they wouldn't have walked in the door.
Right.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about this job for the rest of our time, because how do you get this practice, this really cool office with all of your energy and your style and your flair in this... I'm not going to say this is an anodyne hospital, but all hospitals kind of are. All hospitals.
Right.
Like, I walked through a hospital to get to your office, and it's a therapist's office. It's really cool in here. It's really calming in here. And you're practicing and researching this therapy, which is radical. How are you in here? How do people know you're here? Aren't there protesters?
Not yet. So, oh God, you're bringing up something that is kind of one of those nightmares that you really don't want to have come true.
Well, my only thing that I would imagine there is some people might be concerned about something being funded that they don't like, but I think that most people are pretty curious about the work you're doing now, and I don't know that even with our divided country on a kind of conservative to liberal spectrum, even people who believe in all kinds of conspiracy theories, I'm guessing they still want to know about psychedelics and how they
agree.
Drugs are kind of cross, outside a certain puritanical point of view, and increasingly I would think that you're not going to get a lot of tremendous resistance at researching this.
Okay. I agree.
Good.
And the research is so good. I mean, nobody can say this isn't being shown to be effective.
That's what I've heard from people who I find very credible when it comes to
very
science.
Very credible. We're talking Johns Hopkins, right? Yeah. We're talking UCLA. We're talking NYU. I mean, really fine research institutions are doing this work. And we got into it because the head of our department, God bless her, realized this is the future. This is the future of psychiatry. It truly is, because psychedelics are a game changer.
Okay. I mean, to hear you say that is quite a statement. This is the future, meaning, I mean, what is the future that you see? We can talk about where we're at now, but like that it is commonplace and mainstream practice to prescribe psychedelic trips for
Correct.
Patients.
That would be the dream. That is the dream, yes.
Who benefits? Everybody?
No, not everybody. Every study we've seen so far, approximately 70% of people get better. Well, that is phenomenal. I mean, if you look at antidepressant medication, for instance, it's around 32% of people get better. And then you have all the side effects and long-term difficulties with taking the medicine and all of that. So, psychedelics are really different than that. A great study just came out from University of Wisconsin, and they did over 100 people with psychedelic medicine. They used psilocybin, which is what we're going to be using, and it was major depression, and they showed phenomenal results.
Psilocybin was prescribed to treat major depression.
Correct.
In this case?
Correct. That's
what I want to ask you. Like, I think we all get confused about the difference between the different psilocybin mushrooms,
right?
Ketamine, LSD. I don't even know the language. That's why I haven't done this interview yet. But you're such a kind and gentle, generous person that you're not going to judge my ignorance on it, and you're helping me educate. But who is the likely patient? Who benefits from this? What are the issues that I have? I really want to do it.
Yeah.
Now I want to do it with you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start looking through your drawers to find out where it is. But no, I mean, like, do I benefit from it if I didn't have, like, childhood trauma, but I am dealing with certain anxieties and issues? Or is this a specific kind of person that you think most likely is going to be in that 70% to benefit?
We don't really know, right? All we can kind of look at are the statistics at this point, right? And we can say, sure, if you have generalized anxiety, you're going through some big life changes, and you don't really quite know what the next step is, yes, psychedelics could probably, and I'm saying probably, be very helpful for you.
I feel generally, knowing very little, that everybody is potentially going to benefit, because whatever happens during this guided trip and treatment is probably going to be something that you uncover and learn something about and move forward in the anecdotes I've heard that it's life-changing.
It's life-changing.
So maybe I don't know what the issues are that it's going to help me, or what discovery is going to be made, but it's going to...
Well, let me tell you a little bit about, current research. This is just current research.
Okay.
They're looking at depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. They're looking at autism for social anxiety, like can we make that better for people? The one study I know about that's actually pretty good showed definite improvement. Parkinson's disease, because it's a brain disorder. We know psychedelics create more connections in the brain. They allow more of the neurons to be connected than our usual day-to-day connections.
Who doesn't benefit? I know some people will say, I tried to take it, I took it, nothing happened. Or, I got a little this or that happened, but I didn't make these discoveries that people are talking about. That's
a really good question. Because, to me, the people who actually get better are first the people who want to get better.
And that's probably true of any
everything.
type of...
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
And second of all, guided trips are the way to go. Doing it on your own, I know a few people who've done it on their own, successfully, by the way. And I know some people who've done it on their own, and they were not successful. I would not recommend doing it on your own. You need to know that you're safe, and you need to know that there's someone there in case something weird starts to go on in your mind. and that you could talk about it and that this person would help you. That's a really important piece of this.
What's the worst thing that can happen? No one's ever died.
Not that we know of, actually. I mean, there was all that stuff in the 60s, 70s about people jumping off of roofs and stuff. There may have been one person who jumped off a roof, but that's sort of one of those apocryphal stories that we don't really know about. So no, as far as we know, nobody's died. The amazing thing, okay, if you look at, there's a great chart, I wish I had it for you, that shows like the morbidity of certain medications, right? And psilocybin has the lowest morbidity of any medicine on the market.
Really? Advil has more.
Right. Isn't that wild?
Yeah. So
it's safer than caffeine.
Well, it's safer in that you're not. How dare you insult caffeine?
I know, I love coffee.
But it's safer in that you don't die. There's no fatalities. But the question for a lot of us is, I'm scared to do this.
Right. I'm scared that I might go crazy. Right?
I don't know. I don't. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Or at least temporarily, I might have like a real panic attack as a result.
Exactly. And people do.
Even when guided.
Yes. Which is why it's really nice to have a guide who knows what they're doing.
Right.
Right? Because you can help a person who's in a panic place. But, it's not like your best friend sitting there is going to know what to do. But an experienced guide will know what to do.
Talk to me about success stories.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I went to Brazil, did a lot of work in Brazil, which is where it was legal for me to do it. So I did a lot of work. One success story, this was a man who had gone to South America to various locations to do ayahuasca, okay? And had come out with basically, that was a really interesting experience, but no real change in his life. I mean, no real change. He's alcoholic, he's a smoker, his marriage is falling apart, he wants to change all of that. And he'd go and he'd say, well, that was an amazing experience, but it didn't help me. So he gets to me, and we do a guided experience. He has not smoked or had an alcoholic drink since his trip.
So to treat and potentially cure addiction, probably not only to the things where I feel like tobacco or nicotine and alcohol are the most addictive.
Very.
And so anything less than that, people have addictions to all kinds of sex and whatever. It can treat and cure addiction.
It has, yes, it has. Now, will it do it for everybody? Well, we're looking at alcoholism. Our study is directed toward alcoholism. Mm-hmm. We'll see. There's only been one other study on alcoholism, and 81% of the people had decreased their intake of alcohol, and 52% or 51%, something like that, had actually stopped drinking. And this was an NYU study. Which is, that's pretty good.
Well, I don't even know that I care about the statistics of a study, in this case, on treating alcoholism or addiction, because we all know someone or are someone who's tried everything.
Absolutely.
And most people who go to rehab, which is the traditional primary, last resort, and you got to, as you said, want to be there, but you've hit rock bottom, you're at rehab for any kind of addiction. A lot of people relapse, they go back to their drugs.
Absolutely.
They try everything else, a book, a therapist, you name it, changes in their life, any kind of, and nothing works. Why not try?
Exactly. Why not try psilocybin?
Right. And the answer for many in the sober community is, I'm going to do drugs to quit drugs.
Right.
That's forbidden. That goes against our 12 steps. Or I'm not saying all people think that. I've just heard people in the sober community be critical of taking a drug to quit a drug, which I find a little bit boring, to be honest with you. Because I know that cannabis has helped a lot of combat veterans who have PTSD get off heroin and opiates.
Exactly.
So I know that is pretty so this is not
right.
Why not try this? Is my when it comes to addiction, we've tried everything else. Why wouldn't you try psilocybin?
And it looks like MDMA, ecstasy, right, is going to be legalized next year. And that has been the primary treatment for PTSD in this country, and is showing amazing results. I mean, people are getting better. People who've had PTSD for 20 years don't have it anymore. That's incredible.
So you've given me a success story on addiction, and now you're talking about PTSD generally.
Right.
Tell me some more things that people come in and say, this is why I want to use it, and that...
Yeah, I can tell you about one of the first people I worked with was a woman who, she was there because of mother stuff, right? I mean, she had a difficult childhood with her mother. And before we started, she says, "Oh, I got to tell you, I've got a really small bladder, so let's just assume that I'll need to go to the restroom." I said, "Sure, that's
during
fine."
the trip,
right? I said, "Fine." So 2 different times she's up, she's going to the bathroom. The third time she gets up, and it's right at a moment when very serious stuff was starting to happen, and she goes to the bathroom, and I'm thinking, "Okay, I get it. This is a way to avoid this." Right? But she didn't know that. It's unconscious. It's her body. She doesn't have control over this. She comes back, she lies down, and I say to her, now we'd been doing some child work with her inner child, okay? And I said, I wonder if your inner girl, your little girl, would be willing to hold more water for you. And she just went lit up.
Meaning so she doesn't have to go to the bathroom again and let you stay there. When you say you've been working at previous sessions or during the session you were working with
We had done some online Zoom therapy. And so she's coming to Brazil, and there she is. And it was magic. I mean, she literally lit up, and then she said, "I'm healing my bladder." And I just let her lie there, and she just was feeling so good. And she hasn't had a problem since then. With
frequent urination.
Yes, frequent
which is a
urination.
common thing.
Right, and she'd had it since childhood.
Was that why she was there?
No.
But it was a byproduct of
dealing with her mother. What the big insight was, the way she got attention as a baby was by having a wet diaper.
So I've heard this a lot, that during these trips, you have memories even of your birth, much less of infancy.
Exactly.
That somehow unlock things, as you just mentioned.
Yes.
That sounds crazy to me. Like, that sounds so hard to believe, which is why I kind of want to do it, to see if,
To see if it happens for you, right? Yeah.
But I've heard that so many times. The thing that I really am most curious about, and I guess this is personal, but we hear so much talk of trauma today, which is great.
True.
Which is great that people are talking about.
At least we're talking about it, right.
And what it does and what it means and how it manifests. My wife won't mind me talking about her life and using it as an example. She wants to try this, as I told you before we started. She had a really rough childhood, suffered from a lot of different traumas, physical abuse, later sexual assaults when she was older, just an overall lack of affection. What that has created for her, I have tried to understand for her. But it's really hard to understand what it does and how it has animated her anxieties today and everything.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about PTSD and veterans, I feel like we talk too much about them almost because, of course, they were in combat. But we know there's research that says kids in impoverished areas where there's a lot of violence suffer a very similar kind of acute PTSD. So my wife probably has that. A lot of people have these serious childhood traumas.
Right.
And how does tripping on any of these different drugs change that for a person who's tried a lot of different things probably? Maybe they haven't worked with the right therapist, or maybe they haven't worked on the trauma in the childhood with a therapist, or they've tried other things, but how does it help? Does it help?
Yes, it helps. Absolutely, it helps.
Give me an example, like a trauma. I don't get it.
Okay. Well, the man I told you about originally had a lot of childhood trauma. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm not even going to go into it, but it was, similar to what you've described. Okay. And he had a lot of work to do, right? So basically for him, honestly, one experience with psilocybin was not enough. He needed 3 experiences. I think that's where we're going to end up, honestly. There's a lot of people who one shot at this isn't going to do it, and there are a lot of people for whom one shot will do it, which we don't know. There's so many questions we don't know the answers to.
It feels too good to be true.
Right.
That one shot of this drug will solve your childhood trauma.
It's not that easy, of course, right? Any good therapist working with this is going to take a history. And they're going to have a very good understanding of what this person has been through. Because any of it can come up during the experience, any of it. So you better know your person really well, okay? Then there's a very delicate process of teaching them how to find their own center, their own core, their own safe place within inside themselves, in their own body. Where can they feel safe? So for me, that's a very important part of the therapy before any medicine is ever given, okay? So they find this beautiful spot inside of themselves, and then they're going into this very intense experience. And they can get scared. They can get scared. Of course they can. I've been scared doing psilocybin. I mean, it can be scary, but you have to find that core. So a lot of the experience gets around to, okay, how do we help get you to this core place where you really are safe and you really feel your own sense of security and control and all of those things, right? So that's part of it. The other part of it is that the child self is still there. I mean, we all are a child, really, still, right? I mean, I can remember my 4-year-old and going to school and all the weird trauma that happened in school, right? And those traumas are still in me, right? They didn't go away. There's a great book by Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes.
Okay.
We have it
okay.
in my home.
So you know.
My wife said it's transformational.
It is.
But I feel like books and, videos or a conversation like ours helps people realize that they've suffered trauma and maybe what it animates in their life. But I don't feel like those books necessarily...
It doesn't heal them.
That's what I was going to...
Correct. What we need to understand is in virtually everybody, our nervous systems have been really dysregulated. And in trauma, it's even worse. So at least a fair amount of the work is teaching the person how to get to a regulated nervous system. Now, some of that you're going to be working with autonomic processes. Autonomic is automatic. So it's unconscious processes that just happen that you have no control over, right? With the psychedelic, you suddenly start relating to, oh my God, my arm is moving in this weird way and it's bringing up this memory, and now I see who was involved in that memory, and I recognize how traumatic that was, and oh, my poor little girl, what she went through. So then you're making a relationship to this part of your body that is expressing nerves in a way that you've never made it before. And you're recognizing that this, if you can dialogue with that child part and help her feel safe and secure, you have now made a big leap in consciousness.
Oh, I was not expecting to feel that emotional right there, and that was going to be my next question. I feel like you weren't quite answering, but you did. So I'm now talking to that abused little boy during the session, having a talk with him. So here's the harder question that I don't even know how you answer this, but I have a feeling you'll have a great way of talking about it. This isn't me, but a lot of people, it sounds like it might have been you with your mom, issues with your parents. My entire childhood, my parents didn't know how to, if I'm being generous, love me. They didn't love me.
Yeah.
Therefore, as an adult, I don't know how to love myself, much less another person. How does, if that's me,
right?
If that's my life,
that's
and it's a lot of people,
right? How
does using these drugs in a guided session teach me, or does it teach me to be on a path, much less to be on understanding how to love myself and how to love another person? Does it help that kind of a thing? Like
Definitely.
My whole life,
Definitely.
my mom was bad to me, didn't know how to love me. You're telling me I'm going to take a guided meditation and I'm going to learn how to love myself and others?
Yes, I'm telling you that.
You've seen that?
Yes, I have seen that. It's really important to get into the body. Okay, I can't stress that enough. The healing actually comes through the body and the relationship with the body, which is actually the relationship with the subconscious mind and the child self.
I think people have a really hard time believing that. I believe it. That book, The Body Tells a Score, there's a lot of science, but I think what you just said, some people will be like, come on. I want to explain.
Okay, let me put it this way. Is there a part of your body that acts up fairly frequently?
My left knee, a bit of an impingement. Yeah, maybe that.
We can start there.
You mean when you say acts up, it bothers you, it irritates you, it's an impingement. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I've been having this weird thing with one of my knees. In my meditation, every morning I go, grateful that my knees are okay because I love to exercise, and exercise brings me peace and happiness. So,
absolutely.
So my knee.
Okay, so your left knee. So as an archetypal psychologist, meaning I have really looked at the metaphors of the body and of other things as well, but the metaphors of the body are so deep. And you can't actually just say, oh, your left knee is this, all right? But what you can say in a general way is, well, the left side is the feminine, the right side is the masculine. What you can say in a general way is knees are usually about moving forward, right? Because you need to use your knee to walk, to move. So there might be something about the feminine part of yourself, which is, by the way, your mother. You know, that's who you learned feminine from. We all have masculine and feminine sides of ourselves. That left side hurts. It hurts. It doesn't want to move forward. It's hard. It feels something that keeps it from really being able to be completely functional. So I would probably, if we were in a psychedelic experience, I would be having you really move deeply into your left knee, experience the sensations, experience the memories attached to the sensations, and then experience when it first happened. Was there a child that hurt his left knee? Or was there a mother who didn't take care of the child's left knee? Yeah, all those kinds of questions would be coming up.
But what if it's a torn meniscus? Or ligament?
You're going to get into Buddhism with me here, so
fine with me. I'm reading it every day. I mean, Pema Chodron is my. Do you know Pema Chodron?
Oh, I love her.
So she's my main teacher.
Oh, she's
I've never met her or interviewed her. I'd like to. I tried, but she's done giving interviews.
She's kind of tired. She's tired
her
of that.
books. Yeah, her books
are amazing.
I read them over and over.
Yeah,
so
they're so deep.
I'm happy to get into Buddhism.
Well, okay, from a neuropsychological perspective and a Buddhist perspective, I look at the mind, no, I'll put it a different way. I look at the body as a representation of the subconscious mind. So let's kind of unpack that a little bit, okay? For instance, I mean, I don't make my blood flow, right? I don't make my saliva. I don't make my, sweat. All of that is being done at a much deeper level of being. And it's being done in the unconscious mind. So your unconscious is running your body, essentially. Your unconscious is also holding every trauma that you had, unless somehow you manage to release it.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't usually release trauma in any...
Right. Usually what we do is we go into some kind of frozen posture, or we try to get away, right? Well,
you might not have known you experienced it.
As a child you don't.
Right.
It's just reality as a child. Yeah.
For sure, it's all you know.
Yeah. And so you don't learn to love yourself. I mean, to get back to your life, and my life too, I did not know how to love myself. I had to do a lot of work in order to get to a place where I could.
I think I did. That was not an issue for me. I think I know how to love myself. I know how to love others.
Good really for you. You sounded like you were talking about
I was talking about a hypothetical, which is in my life, which I know a lot of people that had experienced
me too.
that. And it's, for me, I don't think experienced that, to the level. I mean, of course I have insecurities, lots of them. But in terms of, I think, the way you're talking about loving yourself, I mean, who wouldn't? Look at the symmetry in my body, doctor. But no, I mean, my parents were awesome.
Oh,
my parents were great.
How lucky you are.
Yeah, so fortunate, so lucky. And
so few people.
I have a pretty good understanding of that, which is, not to make it about me, but as I've struggled now in my 40s with issues around work and money and career, and my girls growing up and moving out, my older daughter, whatever the issues are, I have no resilience because my life was so great. And that's an interesting thing to explore for me now. And that's why I've been talking a lot about my own practice and what I do to deal with all of these setbacks, because I didn't have the training, you know.
Yeah.
But you don't want to teach your children. You don't want to torture them and teach them.
You don't have to. Life will teach them.
Exactly.
We don't need to look for stress. It's everywhere.
Exactly.
Right? So that's not an issue.
So I guess I want to keep talking to you, but where are you now? Where do you think we are as a nation or in medicine, whether it be Western or elsewhere, on the research, on the acceptance, on the actual work you're doing here now?
It's getting a lot better. You know Michael Pollan's book, I'm assuming,
I've
How to Change Your Mind.
interviewed him a few times.
Yeah, wonderful book.
That was a huge moment in the credibility of this, because he's such a reputable,
such a brilliant writer.
Journalist.
Yes,
if he's saying this,
then it must be true.
Really,
right?
I mean, for
yeah.
sure.
No, he did a fabulous job of getting it out into the world. We're all very appreciative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot more funding for it. This guy, Tim Ferriss, is always talking about his...
Tim Ferriss has funded a number of things.
And he's a very kind of pragmatic, I feel like, pretty pragmatic about it and realistic about it. But, I mean, where do you... So it's a lot more accepted, is what you're saying, as a result of this mainstreaming.
Yes. And I think it will become even more accepted as we move forward. The problem is there's so much hype right now around this that... It's concerning. Okay.
What are you concerned about with what is the hype, and what are you concerned about that people...
The hype is that, this is going to do it. Finally, I'm going to find the cure.
And if you come in with that...
Right. And it's okay to come in with that, but it might not be what does it for you.
And that's going to be devastating if it doesn't work.
Yes. So, at least at this point, 30% of people don't get better.
Right.
So, then, 30%.
Your concern about the hype is that it makes people think that it's going to solve whatever their problem is, and if it doesn't, it might make their problem worse.
I don't know that it would make them worse. But it might make them feel pretty hopeless. Who knows? Who knows, right? We're just beginning to understand what psychedelics do to the mind. I mean, we are in our infancy. Really? Oh, yeah. I mean, we're barely understanding that, oh, my goodness, look at that. All these connections are happening in the brain that don't normally happen. That in itself is incredible.
So if someone wants to try this, what do they do? Because it's still mostly underground.
It's almost all underground. That's right. And if you don't know an underground therapist who's good, you're not going to get the help you need.
And it's hard to find that recommendation and to trust it.
It is. It's very hard.
So can you not really say on the record, because you work here at the hospital, how to help people find? You have to be careful about how you...
Yeah, I would be hesitant to say, because I don't... first of all, in Iowa, I know of a few people who are doing some work, but I'm not even sure what they're doing. I don't know them well enough to say, you should go to this person.
But can I enter your trial? Yours? Can I be your patient?
Are you an alcoholic?
I don't think so. No.
Well, then you can't.
It's all alcoholism.
It's all alcohol.
Well, I'll start drinking. I really like you, so I really want to try.
So you got to start drinking.
So how long does it take to become?
I don't know.
By the way, how do you know if someone's an alcoholic? Do you have a test for it?
We've got this thing called the DSM-5.
Right.
Okay, so that we just look at the criteria, and if they meet criteria, then they're an alcoholic. Yeah.
Well, this is. But your suggestion is what you want to say is I find someone that is credible and has a good reputation that you feel safe doing a guided trip with.
Right.
But that's hard to do.
It's hard to do.
And
you could go to Colorado, which is now they have decriminalized, I think, virtually every medicine except for the toad. Okay, you know about the toad, I'm assuming. There's a...
the toad?
The Sonoran toad,
the something about the toad's excretions or something?
It excretes this 5-MeO-DMT. But there's no reason to go lick a toad, people. Don't do it. Yeah. You can get a chemicalized version of it. You don't need to destroy toads.
I guess the other thing, and there's probably plenty of resources, but how do I know what kind of a drug I want to do to treat whatever my issue is? If it's alcoholism, if it's childhood trauma, how do I know if it's psilocybin, if it's MDMA, if it's DMT? I'm very confused about that.
That is a very good question because we don't know the answer to it yet.
Oh.
What we do know, right, is psilocybin works for this, and this, the things I told you about that we're doing research on. But we don't know. right? We don't know. Now, we know that MDMA has done fantastic work for PTSD. But I've also seen PTSD get better with psilocybin. So, and with ayahuasca. I mean, in South America, that's what they're using is ayahuasca. But again, the guided trip is the key.
I guess my last question is, how do you know that whatever you're taking is good? For example, hypothetically, let's say you were talking to a person who was interviewing you whose friend had sent him mushrooms and they were at home in a drawer near his nightstand. Let's say that hypothetical existed and that he had those mushrooms. How do I know if the mushrooms that my friend sent me are going to be good?
What there is
it usually provided by the...
There's a website, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but I bet we could find it.
Tell me later. I'll include it in the show notes.
Yeah, okay. Because there's a website, and it's actually run by the DEA or something. At any rate, the scientists who are at this website will examine whatever you have and anonymously let you know whether it's pure or not. Yeah, which is great. Yeah. But, it takes money and it takes time to do that. Yeah.
But they will also provide it at a lot of these guided, so you don't have to question if it's going to work, if it's the right quality or if it is...
Right. I honestly would look for that in a guide, that they have had the quality of their substance tested.
Got it.
Yeah.
You've answered so many of my questions and created a lot more. I am so appreciative and grateful to your time. It's worth coming to Iowa City just to sit down with you. Really, really appreciate it so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, there you go. Dr. Candida Maurer out in Iowa City. If you've got more questions for her, send them my way. I'll get them to her, but I'll definitely be in touch with her again. Thanks again to Mark Nolte for that and for everything else in Iowa City. You'll be hearing more interviews with more guests. I'll be dropping throughout the week, but I could not have done it without Mark's help, so really, really awesome. That's all I've got for you on today's show. Please sign up for a paid subscription if you haven't already. You can always pay more and give a rating and review on Spotify, iTunes, and of course subscribe on all the social media. I'm using Threads more right now. I'm experimenting with Threads. If you're not following me there, then sign up. Be the change you want to see in the world, folks. I love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. John Carroll, take us out.
So long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. You got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of the stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. While you lying awake wondering where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up